Good evening. I'd like to call the November meeting of the Beavercreek Board of Zoning Appeals to order. Ms. Gillow, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Altoff?
Here.
Mr. Bottler?
Yes.
Mr. Essman?
Yes.
Mr. Archibald?
Yes, here. Okay, everybody's here and accounted for. Do we have any news on our fifth member?
No, not at this time.
Okay. All right, looking at the agenda, looks like we have one case, public hearing on this. Do we have any additions or subtractions to the agenda? Okay. Entertain a motion to accept the agenda as written.
I move the motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda by voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, so passed. Okay, approval of the minutes from the last meeting, which was from September 8th. Any additions, subtractions, corrections, anything anybody would like to add to the minutes? No, hearing none. By a voice vote, all in favor of approving the minutes as written, say aye.
Aye.
Aye?
I'll abstain,
You'll
since I was
abstain?
not at the
Yeah,
meeting.
you were not there.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you were listed as absent.
Yeah, you were.
But I can't comment on how appropriate the minutes are.
All right, and any opposition? We have one abstention, and therefore the approval of the minutes as written. Okay, our first case, public hearing V 21-9 All-Star Fence, 1630 South Laddie Court. Ms. Gillow.
This is case number V21-9 on an application filed by All Star Fence, 1700 Bauer Avenue, Kettering, Ohio, 45420, requesting a variance from Chapter 158.105C of the City of Beavercreek zoning code, requesting permission to construct a 6-foot-high fence in the required front yard along Haynes Road on a double frontage lot in an R1A district. The property is located at 1630 South Laddie Court, further described as Book 5, Page 4, Parcel 213, on the Greene County Property Tax Atlas.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have someone here from the applicant?
Yeah,
Come on up. Nice to see you again.
nice to see you again.
It's been, a couple months, right?
Yeah.
Okay, tell us why you're here and what you're looking for.
Well, basically, my sales guy actually went out to sell it, and there was a fence on the right and a fence on the left, so they figured that it'd be okay to actually go in there and connect the two fences, you know, because there was a fence on the right that's a privacy fence and a fence on the left that was a privacy fence, so we weren't thinking about calling, you know, Matt or Melissa to see if it would be approved because it was already there, you know, privacy fences. So we figured we just connect the two, and then when we come to find out that you weren't allowed to have a privacy fence right there either. So that's basically why we're here, is to see if we can connect the two fences and make it all privacy going down through there.
Okay, very cool. I'm sure we will have questions.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Funk, would you care to present us with the staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So basically, we have a case for the applicant basically is requesting that a 6-foot fence be allowed in the required front yard. It's a request for that. Basically, they want to, per their site plan, they want to encroach about 18, 19 feet into the required front yard. And basically, on a double frontage lot, basically the lot fronts Laddie and Haynes. So because it fronts two different roads, it is considered to have two front yards. And our zoning code requires or prohibits fences above 42 inches in the required front yard. So basically, the property owner could actually install a 6-foot fence along this red line right here without any issue. And so basically the applicant's here to request that a variance be requested to allow it further into the required front yard. So, in looking at this, we looked at the criteria. Well, let me address basically a couple things. That the applicant mentioned this fence here, which is an existing 6-foot fence that was installed illegally sometime in the past. We don't really know exactly when. And if they were to replace that fence, they would also have to bring it into compliance, with our zoning code, and it would also have to be, the 6-foot fence would also have to be out of the required front yard. The fence to the south was actually had gotten approval, even though it shouldn't have been in the required front yard. It had gotten approval to be in the front yard. And again, if that fence is ever replaced, they will also be required to bring it into compliance as well. So, and then basically, there's 2 other places up here that have basically 48-inch fences in the required front yard that were, one of them, they're both very old. One's a chain link and one's a split rail. And again, once replaced, which will probably be sooner than later, they'll also need to be brought into compliance. The green properties basically are properties that have gotten permits for compliant fences, either a 42-inch fence in the required front yard, or they kept their fence out of the required front yard, which is what the code requires. So, so basically, our goal is to continue to work to bring these properties into compliance with what the zoning code requires. So with that, basically looking at, this is the rear yard of the property owner's property and along Haynes Road there. So in looking at the criteria, basically, as staff, we determined that basically there's no condition there related to the property itself that is creating a practical difficulty that's keeping them from being compliant with the code. Because to grant a variance, you need to have a practical difficulty, that there's something unique about the property that's preventing them from the strict application of the code. And so basically, we didn't find that was the case in this one. They can easily, build a compliant fence. The other thing is, would the code, the criteria would require the minimum variance necessary. And again, they can build a compliant fence. So even at that, there's really not even a need for the minimum. Would be 0 because they can build a compliant fence. So basically, looking at the criteria, staff, for various reasons, found that they did not meet the criteria. There are a few criteria that they did meet. As far as it wouldn't infringe on the rights of the surrounding property owners. That the change of character would not be harmful to the neighborhood, things like that. But again, our goal is to incrementally bring all these properties into compliance with the code and not actually increase the nonconformities of these, fences over 42 inches in the required front yard. And so for that reason, staff is recommending disapproval of the variance request.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sure we will have questions. Okay, so since this is a public hearing, is there anyone here from the public who wishes to add anything or discuss anything? Yes, ma'am, if you wouldn't mind stepping up to the microphone, and up in the upper left-hand corner, there's a little piece of paper up there, if you would read that. Is it left-hand corner or right-hand corner?
Oh.
Okay.
My name's Joyce Hoffman. I'm at 1640 South Latty, and I affirm that the testimony I'm about to give the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Beavercreek is the whole truth to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
I bought that property with the fence, and this gentleman says he figures he can just connect the 2 fences. My property my fence between the 2 properties are set in 3, maybe 4 feet. He can't just attach and appropriate my lawn for his own use.
Okay, so can you put up the street map again? Yeah, so which is your property?
The corner lot.
The corner lot. Okay.
The red one to the, just north of the applicant.
Okay, all right. So you're indicating that he can't just tie into your fence without your permission?
No,
Right?
he's got to
Okay.
leave it 3 to 4 feet. He can, I don't care if they put a fence up, fine with me. They just cannot come on my property to do it.
I
He'll have to run his own side fence and not use mine. We mow on that side fence. We've taken care of that side fence all the way through to the time they purchased it.
Okay,
They've already dug their holes, put a post up. I asked them to remove it. They haven't removed it, and they still have the hole dug, not covered yet. So
okay.
that's my objection.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate your input. Okay, Ms. Gill, any other input from the public? We do have some written input, correct?
Yes, we do. There was a email that was received from Doug Gouldy of 1620 South Laddie Court. BZA members did receive a copy of it. He stated that they did not have any objections to the request.
And he is,
To the south.
okay. Okay. I golf with him. Okay, any other public input? Okay, with that, I'll close the portion of the public hearing, and I will open it up to the board for their discussion. Norm?
Thank you. Yeah, getting old is rough because whatever thought I had for our zoning administrator just sort of flew out of my head.
That's all right, we can come back to you if you would like.
If you wouldn't mind.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mr. Aldhoff, how about you?
Yeah, I've got a question for the city. So I'm trying to, mostly this map, I'm trying to make sure I completely understand what we're talking
Okay.
about here. So if I'm reading it correctly, so the green, the 6 green ones do have a permit to do something that we normally wouldn't let them do, and they've got a fence in place? Or-
So the six properties that are green have gotten fence permits for compliant fences. So
Okay.
they've gotten permits for fences that are compliant. So it's either a 42-inch fence that's in the required front yard, or a taller fence that's outside of the front yard, which is what, so they have, and, most of them in recent years have gotten permits for compliant fences. And so, because our goal is to bring, all these fences into compliance at some point. And so, as they're replaced, they've got to bring their fence into compliance with the code. So there's 3 that, like I was pointing out, the 3 red ones, basically, we don't have permits for. But when those fences are replaced and they go through the permitting process, they'll also be required to bring those fences into compliance with the current code. Part of I didn't mention this. Part of what brought the misunderstanding I think is the fact that the applicant didn't get his permit before he started constructing the fence. So had he come in, got his permit before he started constructing the fence, we could have easily had these discussions before they were out there, digging holes. And so part of the issue is the fact of, they're getting a permit after they've kind of begun construction of the fence. So not that would prevent them from coming here, but we at least could have had the discussion and worked with the applicant ahead of time, to avoid this. And I will point out too that the person to the south, basically that was in favor of this also, has a non-conforming fence.
So there's 4 non-conforming fences, the orange and the 3 reds, but the orange has a permit?
The orange has a permit. Yeah, the orange has a permit. The 3 red ones don't have a permit, and those fences are old. We don't
But
know
they're all
when-
non-conforming.
Do what?
But they're all non-conforming.
Yeah, they're all non-conforming.
And the orange one is also non-conforming but has a permit.
Yes, yes. And then like I said, the 5 green ones are, they have permits for, they have valid permits for compliant fences. And then basically the 4 or 5 cream-colored lots are basically people that don't have fences through that stretch. So again, when they come in to apply for a permit, just like this one that the applicant's applying for, they'll also have to build a compliant fence.
So I think, isn't it true that if we give a variation for a property, it stays with that property pretty much forever, right?
Yes, yes.
So if the orange one has a or a permit for a fence, I thought I heard you say that when it has to be replaced, they'd have to change it.
They never obtain a variance for the fence that's non-compliant.
So they got a permit to build a
A permit
fence.
was issued for a permit that shouldn't have been a permit. A permit should have never been issued for that permit.
Oh, okay. I was trying to understand the difference between the orange.
There's not an easy way to say that. They shouldn't have.
It's our bad, right?
Yeah, that's right. They should have never had a permit for that fence. It's a non-compliant fence. It's a non-conforming fence. And upon replacement, we would work with them to build a compliant fence.
I see.
So,
Okay, thank you.
So on that point, can you give us a little history about this non-compliant permit that was issued and what gives us the right to revoke that permit and say, no, you can't have this fence anymore?
well, we're certainly not going to revoke the permit. We're not
Well,
going
if they go to build another fence, we are, right?
Well, anytime you build a new fence, you have to build a compliant fence. So, you have to go through.
But see, that was what I was asking about in terms
Yeah.
of doesn't the variance once granted run with the property?
A variance once granted runs with a property. There is no variance granted for that fence to the south.
I see.
So, but anytime you replace a fence, you have to replace it with a compliant fence, or any other structure. I mean, and that's why we require permits for replacement of structures. Because there's all kinds of zoning. For example, a fence that maybe is turned the opposite direction, the bad side's facing the outside. We used to allow that. We don't anymore. So when they build the new fence, they have to build it with the good side facing the inside. We have fences that maybe one of those properties had a 42-inch fence in the required front yard, and they go to build a 6-foot fence. We require a permit, because they can't have and then we have opportunity to tell them you can't have a 6-foot fence in the required front yard. It's got to be no taller than 42 inches. Because we have situations like that where they're like, well, we had a fence there before, but again, there's the zoning code.
Either have a 6-foot fence farther in or have a 42-foot fence.
Right, yeah, and just like in this situation, we're not telling them they can't have a 6-foot fence. Oops. They can have a 6-foot fence, but it just can't be, it's got to be outside of this 40-foot required front yard. So, they have the ability to build a compliant 6-foot fence. And I guess that's, where BZA has to be careful sometimes because, the requirements is, is there a practical difficulty? Is there something about the property that is unique that's creating strict conformance with the code is creating a hardship?
Let me ask on that, because we had a similar case here, 2 or 3 months ago.
Yep.
How prevalent are double front yards?
So yeah, I did go back and take a look at that. I will point out that, just for clarification, that, each case is unique to its own.
I understand
so,
that.
Precedents, but
I didn't mean to imply that. My question is, how prevalent are double front yards in the city of Beavercreek?
Oh, how prevalent are they in the entire city? That I don't know that we even have a count on that.
I think it's not a one-off, right? I mean, there are plenty.
Plenty,
Yeah.
plenty. To the main road and
Yeah.
road behind it. Yeah.
And so I could run down and grab my paper. I thought I had it with me. But basically, there's been 2 variance requests. There's been 2 variance requests in the last 5 years for double frontage, for things in the front yard. One was a fence and one was a shed. And the shed, both of them were really recent. One was the shed,
Yeah.
which was justified because, again, that was a situation where they didn't have the required front yard went all the way up to the house.
Yeah.
So that was a unique situation, for that property that, that the strict application of the code created a hardship, because they otherwise couldn't have a shed. The other one was the fence that we did a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago. The difference when that was basically a corner lot on a stub street that, probably in the future wouldn't even be developed, or, that may not be developed. And if it was developed, it might be so far in the future that, so So we did go ahead and allow, that 48 fence, it's just a 6-inch variance for that one. But those were the only two that we've had in the last, when I went back and looked at our records in the last 5 years.
Sure. Okay. Are you done with questions? Okay. Mr. Espin?
Mine was almost answered. When you said that they could do a compliant fence, I take it that there's two possible ways to do that. One would be a 42-inch fence,
Yes,
and the other one would be a 6-foot fence outside the required front yard,
yes.
which in effect would be what, 12 or 15, in effect cut off about 15 feet of their rear yard?
Yeah, it would be where this inside, the hashed area there is the required front yard for that parcel.
And how many, you don't know how far that is, do
The
you?
total distance from the house, I
Right.
don't know.
Okay.
I didn't measure that. I guess I
Okay,
probably
thanks.
should have, but,
Wasn't the front yard 18 feet wide? Was that what you said?
the distance of the required front yard is like 40, so there's at least another 40,
Okay.
if not more.
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of
here.
proportion. If we knew the one, we could kind of guess the other.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, oh, yeah, Melissa said approximately 87.
From the back corner of the house to the property line along Haynes Road.
So it's about 87 feet.
Anything else?
No, thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Mr. Butler?
Thank you. My question is that.
Turn your mic on.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Now, in your evaluation, out of 8, 4 are out of variance, do not satisfy, right?
4 out of the 8, yes.
Yeah. And along that street, 5 houses green are in compliance and 3 are not, and they didn't apply for the permit and they have a 6-foot fence.
2 of them, only one had a 6-foot fence. The other 2 were 48-inch fences.
Okay. So, but they did not apply for permit, right? You said, see number 3, the yellow one, the one that the ladies over here, she has a house next to that 640, like that,
1640.
yeah,
1640.
1640, she has a 6-foot fence
Mm-hmm.
and that did not apply for permit.
Yeah, and as she stated, the fence was there when she purchased the house. We don't know when that was installed. We're certainly, that fence has been there for so long, we're certainly not going to go after, these 3 individuals that have had fences that could predate the Beavercreek. We're certainly not going to go after them and say, you have a non-compliant fence, therefore you have to remove it. But on the flip side, when those fences are replaced, our goal is to bring those fences into compliance as well. So while we're not going to go after them for that, and that's our practice not to, when there is a nonconformity like that, the goal is to bring nonconformities into compliance. So, we would, they would have to, build a compliant fence at this point. Back to the property of the applicant, there is no fence there
Yes.
currently. So, there's no, when you're looking solely at that property, which is what we're doing with a variance, there's nothing that's would prevent them from building a compliant fence.
No,
Because the variance should be on the merits of the facts regarding that particular property. I know we've talked about some other properties and things like that, but the finding of fact should be, for that property. Is there something unique about that property that justifies the granting of the variance?
right. Now, I am in agreement with your evaluation and code to have those 42-inch fence on that back. And that's not a kind of question. I'm in agreement with you. But my other question is that other 3 houses don't have a permit, they have it, but you're saying that when they replace it, do they know that this is a requirement when they replace next time, that they have to bring their fence to 42 inches? How would you comply? How they would be, how would they know it?
Well, they would
could
know
go
when they
ahead and
would.
replace with 6 foot.
Sure, sure, I understand. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we've specifically notified. I mean, there's many nonconformities throughout the city, so there's really no way for us to go through and actually survey every lot in the entire city to determine, do they have a non-compliant structure, and inform them that upon replacement, they'll have to build a compliant structure. And we just don't have the staff time to accomplish that. And so what happens is when they come in to apply for the fence, we would at that point let them know, that their structure has to be brought in compliance, which happens. I mean that happens, fairly regularly. When someone, that we, because there's not just people that have existing things, but people that say want a fence. I want my shed 3 feet off the property line. We routinely tell them, well, we're sorry, it's got to be 10. It doesn't matter. And even at the fact that, the old shed was there at 3 feet, the new shed has to be 10. That's what the code requires. So again, it's bringing that into compliance. Right. If every person that had a shed at 3 feet or 5 feet applied for a variance, that we'd be busy in here. and honestly, if the board determines to grant a variance, it's like, at some point, if it's a problem, then that's when you change the code. If there's a problem with the code, you change the code. You don't continue to grant variances. You'd have to look at a code change at that point if there's an issue with the code. Like I said, at this point, our goal is to, as we get them in, bring these fences into compliance with the current code.
So my question is, now these people have a 6 foot fence already there, and they are going to replace it. They don't need any permit because they are not changing anything. They are just they're replacing as it was there before, same location. So they are not required to apply for a permit, right?
No, they are required. Anytime you replace a structure.
Same kind
Anytime you replace a structure, you have to obtain a permit for the new structure. Because my example earlier, say a privacy fence was, say the bad side was facing the outside of the property. Now our code requires that the good side face the exterior of the property. So again, that's when we would deal with those situations to let them know, we let them know on privacy fences and things, the good side has to face the exterior, all that kind of stuff. So those non-compliant fences then have to be brought in compliance.
Yeah, also along that street, I see lots of houses don't have any fence, and some have it. So it's basically optional for the resident to have or have not. So people, if they choose to have it, then they have to comply with our code. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. All right, so, so the options to be compliant are 6 foot fence outside of the required front yard.
Yep.
Or 42-inch fence,
They could go
no
all the way.
closer than 25 feet from the center line of the street.
Yeah, they could go all the way up to the front property line with a 42-inch fence.
Right. Okay, so, and I'm really not trying to design a solution here, but the question I have is, can you go back to the property? So the blue line that's not in the required front yard, that can be a 6 foot fence till it gets to the 40-foot
Yeah,
line
and,
and then go down to 42.
yeah, and that's a common occurrence.
Okay.
If you drive around town, you'll see where people will build a 6 foot fence till they get to that front yard area, and then they'll taper the fence down to a 42-inch fence. That's a common practice.
Sure, okay. All right, good. That's for my own personal edification. Thank you. So the question I have now is, why is the required front yard measured from the property line and not the street?
Because that's, basically the front yard by definition is from the front property line to the house is by definition the front yard.
I looked for that definition, and I could not find it.
Yeah, it's in the code. So the front yard, by definition,
I'd
is...
really like you to show it to me.
Okay, yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
But it's from the front property line to the house is considered front yard. So there's a differentiation between front yard and required front yard. So the required front yard, in most platted subdivisions, the front yard, where you don't have, well, let's use the example of a non-double frontage lot. That required front yard, your house has to be outside of the required front yard. So that's usually the building setback line. If you see, in a subdivision, they'll have a building setback line or whatever, and that's usually, that area is because that's area in front of that is the required front yard. And so, there's not to be structures and things like that in that area. So it happens to be on a double frontage lot, they have 2 front yards and therefore 2 required front yards.
Yes, but isn't it an anomaly for this particular application along all of Haynes Road here, that the required front yard starts so far off of the street?
Well, the reason it would be that way, there's utilities in that area. If there was a road widening project, it's not uncommon for some of our major thoroughfares to have a wider right-of-way than where the road actually is. Because there might be, like we've seen in Beavercreek, multiple road widening projects, so they might expand, into that area. Where it might be grass right now, 15 years from now, it might be, pavement. Sure. So that's why, and again, we don't necessarily want 6-foot fences, right up against the street.
No, I totally understand.
So that's why it's measured from the front, because everything from that front property line to the road is city property. It's right of way.
Okay, and that's what I was going to
Yeah,
ask.
okay.
Do you have anything that shows where the right of way is on this?
Yeah, it's basically this line right here is their front property line. So everything to the right is city road right of way.
Okay.
And again, that's not necessarily uncommon on major thoroughfares.
Okay. The other observation that I had was,
Melissa has a definition for front yard if you're interested.
yes, I would be interested. Can you tell me where it is? I have my book out with.
You do have your book. Look in the definition section.
Mm-hmm.
Under lot yard.
Lot yard, yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had your book. I would have helped you.
I was looking under S's for setbacks. Yeah.
Look under lot yards.
Yeah. Lot
Number
yards.
1 is front yard. And then number 4 is actually required yard.
Okay.
Yeah, I have same question also on that one,
Okay.
Lot lines? Is that what it is?
Should
The
be
front
lot
line?
yard.
Lot yards.
Lot yards. Come on. Just wash my hands and can't do a darn thing with them. Lot yards. Okay. Any open space extending the full width of the lot, the depths of which are the minimum horizontal distances between the front lot line and nearest points of principal building. Okay. All right, very cool. I will look further at that. Thank you very much. I don't really have anything else. Do you? Yeah.
First, I want to apologize to this young lady here, because you did talk to John Swisher, and he does know that he cannot tie to your fence. And we were taken off the job, so we didn't touch anything and do any more work, but we will clean up the yard and fill in the holes and so forth and so on, so. But if you look at that property map right there, as Matt stated, as the red line right there, see, it's going through the shed. So there's the right-of-way, he's saying, is going through the shed.
No.
So do they have to move?
No.
Missing it. It's missing. Shed is
So
to the
it's the
left.
blue line is
blue
where they're
line.
allowing the
Yeah.
fence.
The blue line is where you want to put the fence.
line's where you want to put the fence.
Okay.
The
So
red
the
line
red line
is
going
the-
through the shed is where you're allowed to have the fence at 6 foot tall.
Yes, technically, that shed is not compliant.
Okay, okay.
Right.
So, yes, so the people to the south,
Just for
No,
clarification.
you're not allowed
The-
3 foot.
The images may be skewed slightly.
Yeah.
So to say that the red line is through the shed or on the shed may not, I mean, those are the county images and they're shot from a plane
Yeah,
in the sky.
correct.
Okay.
So you'd have to measure that to actually.
no.
Right.
But it's
So-
close.
It's close.
probably
Yes, it's very
But
close.
again, that shed was not allowed in the required front yard, hence is why it's in the location.
And so, when I did call the office, I talked to Sandra the day before, and we were getting ready to start the fence, and we were out there measuring it and laying it out, so forth and so on, and she did say that day, she told me that we had to be 35 feet off the street, which is the fence to the south is 34, and the fence to the north is like 34 feet. So she said we could be 35 feet. And the next day I come in, they called me and they said, well, we need to stop right now because you're not even allowed to have a privacy fence there. So I was like, well, why can these two people have a privacy fence here and they can't? Well, they said, well, the people to the south was grandfathered in. They already had a fence, a privacy fence there. So I talked to Melissa on the phone. I said, Melissa, so, you know, I bid on the fence on the south. I didn't win the project back in maybe 2012. I think is when they looked at it. I think the permit maybe been pulled for, it's a vinyl fence, which is going to be there for
Exactly.
many's and many's of years.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not, that fence is going to be there for 50 years. It's a vinyl fence, okay? So that fence, whenever it comes in compliant or whatever, it's always going to be there through our lifetime. So they said it was grandfathered in and that they were allowed to go ahead, since it was grandfathered in and there was already a 6 foot tall privacy fence there, they allowed them to go ahead and put the vinyl fence in there. So like I said, I mean, so I figured, well, since they can have a vinyl fence, why can't this guy have a vinyl fence? That fence ain't going nowhere no time soon.
Right.
And, I mean, in the right of way, what are you gonna put a 42-inch tall fence there? But you can't put a 6 foot tall fence there, but if they widen the roads, if that 42, I mean, if a 6 foot's there or a 42-inch fence is there and they gotta widen the road, don't the fence have to be moved, anyway? Right? So.
Potentially, but.
Potentially.
Right? So, yeah.
So I just don't understand the codes in Beavercreek. So I live over off of Grange Hall Road. They just did a huge widen, remove this, widen Kemp Road. They put privacy fences 5 feet off the sidewalk going all the way down Kemp Road. And it's the same thing. It backs up to a main road, just like Haynes Road's a main road. I just don't get the difference why that's not a double frontage property on Kemp Road to where Haynes Road's a double frontage property. I don't understand that. And then, like I said, the main thing that I'm saying though too is that they did tell me that the south property got grandfathered in because it had a 6 foot privacy fence there before, so it was grandfathered in to the code. That's what I was told.
Okay. So, I understand your frustration.
Right. I'm not that frustrated. I'm just here for my customer. That's
Sure.
all. He'll do whatever it takes. I'm just,
Sure. Sure. So, in order to be compliant,
right.
right, the 6 foot fence needs to move 20 feet to the left, right? Or
And 20 feet towards the house.
towards the house.
Right.
I'm guessing, roughly.
Right.
Based on that picture. Or
It has to be 42 inches
has
tall.
to be 42 inches within the required front yard,
Correct.
right?
And
It
there
could-
is some bad hills back there and trees back
Yeah, yeah.
there, so I
Right.
mean, and like I said, even if we did scoot it back, I mean, it's gonna be pretty tight to a shed right there.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yep.
It will be. I mean, like Matt said, you really can't tell by the photo, but I just don't understand how this fence on the south side can have, I understand the young lady she moved in, the fence was there, but the vinyl fence that's gonna be there in your lifetime and my lifetime is allowed, and it got approved because it was grandfathered in and it was there before.
Yep.
But the new gentleman that bought the house can't have the vinyl fence. It just don't make sense to me.
Well, sometimes it doesn't. But again, that was 9 years ago, right? That
Per
was
se,
that
yeah.
was grandfathered in.
Right, right. And I don't know when the code's changed.
Well, I don't know that when that was permitted, allegedly, right, when that was permitted, it was permitted as a non-conforming fence, right? 'Cause the code says you gotta do what we're telling you you have to do.
Right.
Right? But for some reason, it got permitted to be non-conforming,
Right.
right? So
Right.
if and when he ever replaces that fence, which if he leaves it up there as a vinyl fence forever, it'll be there
There
forever.
forever. Right.
Right? If he wants to change the color of the fence and he has to replace it with a new one, he's got to be in compliance,
With the, okay,
right?
right.
I'll tell him that on the golf course. But, yeah, so,
It's in your guys' hands. I
Right.
mean, like I said, I'm just here for my customer. He couldn't make it tonight. I'm just trying to help him out. You know, the code rules are the code rules. It just don't make sense to me.
right,
Yeah, that's all. It's not as bad as the mess on 35, so.
right. So
So whoever thought of that.
It would be easy for us to say, right, there are 2 6-foot fences between,
Right.
you know, on either side of that property.
Right.
And you could make them all consistent and it looks, you know, appropriate. But again, you know, we're trying to get people to be in compliance.
Client down the road, and I get that.
This would just exacerbate that problem of, you know, when Joyce wants to replace her fence, right? She'd say, oh, the people next door to me have a
Right,
6-foot fence,
right.
to go out there, so right? So it's just one thing that perpetuates itself
Right.
after the other. So I think you have options, but I'm going to ask for seconds. Anybody else
Yeah,
want
I
to?
have a question.
Okay.
I'm a little confused, Matt. This is the property line, right? This is your easement or utility.
The
kind of
right-of-way,
thing,
yep.
right? Okay.
Yep.
Now, if he wants to have fence on this line, he can have 42-inch fence, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now you say required front yard. What is that? You saying from the back of his house to this one?
No, from the front property line, from that line right
Yeah,
there,
to-
back 40 feet is the required front yard,
Okay, from here to the house,
is the front yard.
front yard, needed 44 feet, right? From here to here.
Wait,
Okay.
that's like 87 feet, I think.
Oh,
the
87
total.
feet. So
Yes.
where is that he can have, where's the 44 feet from this house to, where that comes? Here?
He's allowed to have he can have a 6-foot fence along this line right here.
Oh, okay, he can have that. Okay.
Yes, so,
Okay.
so
he
this,
wants to go in, okay.
this,
he can
all
have
this area right here could be enclosed by a 6-foot fence.
Okay, so
He
he
can build a compliant fence
I see.
at that 40
I
feet,
see,
so.
okay. So what does he want to do? He want to have, go on 6 foot or go on the blue line, 42 inch?
That, he'll have to talk, you know, if the variance is disapproved, then Tim will have to work with his client to determine which option they want to do.
Okay.
So if he builds the 6-foot fence, not in the required front yard, he in effect is cutting his rear yard almost in half. 40 feet here, 47 feet, 87 feet.
Yeah, but that, I mean, that's,
So
yeah.
he's cutting his
Right.
But he
back,
could
his
do-
backyard, or
Reduced.
the front yard
Yeah.
from Haynes, he's actually cutting it in half,
Right.
or close to it.
Somewhat.
Yeah,
22 feet, yeah.
So he does not get to, in effect, if he does that fence, he's choosing not to enjoy.
well, he certainly
About
can.
half his yard.
He can enjoy that portion of his yard, he just has to build a compliant fence. If he chooses to build a 6-foot fence, I mean, that's not, you know, again, you know, we've had those discussions, you know, in our meetings and stuff, and at this point, you know, our position is, you know, to avoid structures and, you know, fences over 42 inches in that required front yard. You know, and again, if someone thinks the code should change, I mean, certainly, you know, someone could propose a zoning code change to, you know, make some changes to that.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not the planning commission, so.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're not the planning commission.
But I think the code should change, because it does not take into account the double front yards, double frontage
I
yards.
absolutely concur. I mean, that's the issue I'm having here, is that
It's an oversight.
if this were not backed up to a thoroughfare, and I'll tell you, if I lived here, the road noise from Haynes, we know how busy Haynes is. You know, I'd be torn here whether I want that 42-inch fence legally where I can enjoy my entire yard, or whether I want to block out some of the noise and the people gawking in my rear yard.
And
So I
and a lot of
think
those have,
I
they have a
concur with you.
mound. I'm sorry. They do have a mound.
Yeah,
They,
mound.
some, they have mounds back there, and they, you know, they do have trees on some of those
Yeah, a
lots
lot
and
of
things
trees
like
there,
that to
yeah,
help,
the trees.
you know, help with that buffer
Yeah,
as far as, you know, noise and visibility and things like that.
okay.
Seconds, seconds, seconds. Okay. So we have a variance request on the floor. We have a staff recommendation to disapprove. I will entertain a motion to either approve the variance request or to disapprove the variance request.
I move the motion to disapprove.
Okay, we have a motion to disapprove the variance request. Do I have a second to that?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Gillo, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Botla?
Yes.
Mr. Essman?
No.
Mr. Altoff?
Yes.
Mr. Archibald?
Yes. Okay, so the variance request has been disapproved, but we think that there are other options to pursue.
Yeah.
So. Okay, any other business on the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this fine meeting. We have a motion and a second.
Second.
By voice vote, all in favor? Say
Yes.
aye. Aye. Anybody opposed to adjourning?
No.
Okay, hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.
I was watching one of the news shows.